the blaster bolt missed Jake's head by inches. He dove behind a crystalline pillar as 3 more shots shattered the floor where he had been standing. The alien palace was under attack, and he was trapped in the throne room with Princess Zara and her guards. Jake checked his rifle. 3 rounds left. Not good. The attackers were pouring through the main entrance, their energy weapons cutting through the royal guards like paper. He had been assigned as the human diplomatic escort, nothing more. Now he was the last line of defense between the princess and a dozen heavily armed insurgents. Zara stood frozen near her throne, her violet skin pale with fear. Her guards lay scattered across the marble floor, their advanced energy shields useless against the overwhelming firepower. The attackers wore black combat suits with personal force fields that shimmered with each deflected shot. Jake ran to her, grabbing her arm. She yanked away from him, her silver eyes flashing with anger and terror. The human armor on his body looked primitive compared to the sleek technology around them. He wore simple ceramic plates over a Kevlar vest, a design that had not changed much in 200 years. His helmet was basic ballistic protection with a simple visor. One of the insurgents stepped forward, pointing his weapon at them. Jake pushed Zara behind a column and raised his rifle. The insurgent laughed, his translator making the sound mechanical and cold. He said something in his native language, and the others joined in the mocking laughter. Zara spoke from behind Jake, her voice shaking. He says your armor is museum quality. He says humans still dress like cavemen for war. Jake did not respond. He was counting. 12 hostiles, 3 at the main door, 4 spreading along the left wall, 5 coming up the right side. They were confident, moving slowly, savoring their victory. That was their first mistake. The lead insurgent raised his hand, signaling his team to hold fire. He wanted to take the princess alive. That was their second mistake. He started walking toward Jake, still laughing, his force field glowing brighter as he activated it to maximum strength. Jake waited until the alien was 15 feet away. Then he moved. He threw his rifle at the insurgent's face. The weapon bounced off the force field, but it made the alien flinch and raise his arms reflexively. In that half-second of distraction, Jake was already in motion. He closed the distance in 3 running steps. The insurgent tried to bring his weapon around, but Jake was too close. He drove his knee into the alien's midsection, right below the force field emitter on his chest. The device cracked under the impact. The force field flickered and died. Jake's hands moved in a blur. He grabbed the alien's weapon arm with his left hand, hyperextending the elbow with a sharp twist. The arm broke with a sound like snapping wood. The weapon clattered to the floor. His right fist drove into the alien's throat, crushing the windpipe. The insurgent dropped, gasping for air that would not come. The other attackers stood frozen for exactly 2 seconds. They had never seen anyone breach a military-grade force field with physical force. They had never considered that human armor was not meant to stop energy weapons. It was meant to allow movement. Those 2 seconds cost them everything. Jake scooped up the fallen weapon and opened fire. He did not aim for center mass where their shields were strongest. He aimed for their legs. The energy bolts punched through the force fields at the lower edge where they met the ground, the weakest point in any shield design. 3 insurgents fell, their knees destroyed. The others scattered, diving for cover. Jake kept moving, never staying in one place. He fired as he ran, each shot precise and devastating. The aliens tried to track him with their weapons, but he was too fast. Human reflexes, honed by evolution as persistence hunters, gave him an edge they could not match. He vaulted over a fallen column and came up behind 2 attackers. Before they could turn, he fired point blank into the back of their heads where their shields did not extend. They dropped instantly. 7 down, 5 left. The remaining insurgents realized their mistake. They stopped laughing. They stopped moving slowly. They opened fire with everything they had. The throne room erupted in a storm of energy bolts that turned the air itself into a glowing inferno of destruction. Jake was already gone. He had dropped and rolled the moment they started firing. He came up next to Zara, grabbed her by the waist, and ran. She screamed as he carried her toward a side exit she had not noticed. The door was hidden behind a tapestry, a secret passage known only to the royal family. Energy bolts chased them across the room. Jake felt one graze his shoulder plate, melting the ceramic but not penetrating. Another hit his leg armor, and he felt the heat through the Kevlar. He did not slow down. He kicked the tapestry aside and smashed through the wooden door behind it. They tumbled into a narrow corridor. Jake dropped Zara and spun back to the doorway. 2 insurgents were charging after them. He pulled his sidearm, a simple 9mm pistol, and fired 6 rounds in 2 seconds. The bullets were too small and too fast for the force fields to register as threats. They passed through the shields like they were not there. Both insurgents fell with bullets in their heads. Jake slammed the door shut and dragged a heavy statue in front of it. He turned to Zara, breathing hard but ready to keep fighting. She stared at him with wide eyes, her earlier arrogance completely gone. "What are you?" she whispered. Jake checked his pistol. 11 rounds left. "I am a human," he said. "And you just learned why we do not need fancy shields and energy weapons to survive." The sound of more attackers echoed from deeper in the palace. Jake grabbed Zara's hand and pulled her down the corridor. The fight was far from over, but now she understood. Human armor was not about technology. It was about letting a human do what humans did best: move, adapt, and never stop fighting. The corridor stretched ahead into darkness. Behind them, the insurgents were breaking through the door. Jake ran faster, Zara struggling to keep up with his pace. They needed to reach the security station on the lower level. If he could access the palace defense grid, he could turn this situation around. They rounded a corner and ran straight into 3 more attackers. Jake did not hesitate. He fired his pistol as he charged, dropping 1 insurgent before they could react. The other 2 activated their shields and returned fire. Jake threw Zara into an alcove and dodged sideways. An energy bolt hit the wall next to his head, showering him with molten stone. He felt the heat through his helmet, but ignored it. He was counting his shots. 10 rounds. 9. 8. The insurgents advanced, confident in their shields. They learned too late that confidence was just another word for carelessness. Jake emptied his magazine in a controlled burst, every bullet aimed at the narrow gaps where their shields met their helmets. 2 more bodies hit the floor. Zara emerged from the alcove, her face a mixture of shock and something that looked like awe. "How many more?" Jake asked, reloading his pistol with practiced speed. "I do not know," she said. "There could be dozens. They planned this for months. Then we keep moving." Jake grabbed her hand again, and they ran deeper into the palace, toward whatever waited in the darkness ahead. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. The insurgents were learning they would not underestimate the human again. But Jake had spent his entire life being underestimated by bullies in school who thought he was too small, by instructors in the military who thought he was too soft, by aliens across the galaxy who thought humans were too primitive. Being underestimated was his greatest weapon. It made enemies careless. It made them slow. It made them dead. He smiled grimly as they ran. The princess had mocked his armor when they first met. She had called it outdated and primitive. She had asked why humans still relied on such ancient technology when energy shields and powered suits were available. Now she had her answer. His armor did not need to stop everything. It just needed to keep him alive long enough to close the distance. And once a human closed the distance, all the fancy technology in the galaxy meant nothing. They burst through a door into a vast chamber filled with humming machinery. The security station. Banks of monitors showed feeds from across the palace. More insurgents were sweeping through every level, hunting for them. Jake ran to the main console and started typing commands. The alien interface was complex, but the military had trained him on Coalition systems. His fingers flew across the holographic keys. Zara stood beside him watching the screens. "They will find us here. This place has no other exits." "I know," Jake said calmly. "That is the point." He finished entering his commands and stepped back. On the screens, heavy blast doors began slamming shut throughout the palace, sealing off sections and trapping insurgents in isolated groups. Automated defense turrets emerged from the walls and ceilings, targeting anything that moved with military-grade weapons. The trap was set. Now the hunters would become the hunted. Jake turned to face the entrance, his pistol ready. Zara watched him with new eyes, no longer seeing a primitive human in outdated armor. She saw what he had always been: a warrior, a survivor, a human who would not quit no matter the odds. And for the first time since the attack began, she believed they might actually survive this. The hunt was far from over, but now the predators had become the prey. The security station's heavy door exploded inward with a blast of white-hot energy. Jake grabbed Zara and dove behind a bank of servers as debris rained down around them. 6 insurgents stormed through the smoking doorway, their force fields glowing bright blue as they scanned the room for targets. They had adapted their tactics, moving in a coordinated wedge formation with overlapping fields of fire. Jake popped up and fired 3 quick shots. 2 bullets sparked off force fields. The third found a gap and punched through an insurgent's visor. The alien dropped without a sound. The others scattered, taking cover behind the massive machinery that filled the room. They were learning fast. "Too fast!" The lead insurgent shouted commands in his harsh native language. His team split up, 2 heading left, 2 heading right, trying to flank Jake's position. Standard military tactics. They had probably trained at one of the Coalition's elite combat schools. That was good. It meant they would be predictable. Jake pulled a small device from his vest and showed it to Zara. "When I throw this, close your eyes and cover your ears." "What is it?" she whispered. "Something your people banned 200 years ago." He tossed the flashbang grenade high over the servers. It detonated in midair with a thunderous crack and a blinding white flash. The insurgents screamed, their sensitive alien eyes overwhelmed by the intense light. Their force fields did nothing against sound waves and photons. They stumbled blindly, weapons firing randomly. Jake was already moving. He had closed his eyes at the last second, relying on the mental map he had built of the room. He came around the left side, low and fast. 2 insurgents were staggering near a power generator, blinking frantically as their vision slowly returned. He shot them both in the head before they even saw him. The last 2 insurgents on the right side had been farther from the blast. Their vision was clearing faster. They spotted Jake and opened fire. Energy bolts slammed into the server bank he had just left, melting through the alien technology like butter. Zara screamed and flattened herself against the floor. Jake ran perpendicular to their line of fire, making himself a moving target. The insurgents tried to track him, but they were still partially blinded. Their shots went wide. He reached a support column and used it for cover as he assessed the situation. 2 hostiles left in this room, maybe a dozen more in the palace. His pistol had 4 rounds remaining. He needed to change the equation. The force fields were the problem. They could absorb dozens of shots from conventional weapons before failing. But they had weaknesses. Every shield had weaknesses. You just had to know where to look. Jake studied the insurgents as they advanced on his position. Their shields were standard military issue, probably coalition surplus. They would have a power supply somewhere on their bodies. If he could find it and damage it, the shields would collapse. The problem was getting close enough without getting shot. He looked at Zara. She was huddled behind a console, her whole body shaking with fear. Her silver eyes met his, and he saw something shift in her expression. She was royal. She had been raised to lead. Fear was natural, but she would not let it control her. She nodded at him, understanding that he needed her to do something. Anything that might create an opening. Zara stood up suddenly and shouted at the insurgents in their own language. Her voice rang through the chamber with royal authority. The two aliens hesitated, surprised to hear the princess speaking directly to them. It was only a moment's distraction, but Jake had learned long ago that battles were won in moments. He burst from cover and charged. The insurgents spun toward him, weapons rising. He was 20 feet away, too far. He would not make it. Energy bolts lit up the air around him. One grazed his helmet, melting a line across the surface. Another hit his chest plate dead center. The ceramic shattered, and the Kevlar beneath started to burn. He kept running. 15 feet! The insurgents were backing up now, maintaining distance. Smart. They knew humans were dangerous up close. Their fingers tightened on triggers. More bolts flew. One hit Jake's leg. He felt the impact through his armor and stumbled but did not fall. 10 feet. Almost there. Jake threw his empty pistol at the nearest insurgent. The alien flinched reflexively, raising his weapon to block. His partner started to turn, covering the blind spot. But Jake had already changed direction mid-stride. He leaped sideways, landing on a low equipment rack and using it as a springboard. He launched himself at the second insurgent from an unexpected angle. The alien tried to track him, but Jake was already inside his guard. He grabbed the insurgent's weapon with both hands and shoved it upward. The alien pulled the trigger on reflex. Energy bolts punched through the ceiling, bringing down chunks of metal and wire. Jake ripped the weapon free with a violent twist that broke 3 of the alien's fingers. The insurgent's partner swung his weapon around, trying to get a clear shot. Jake used his opponent as a human shield, spinning him around just as the shots came. The energy bolts hit the insurgent's back. The force field held for a moment, then collapsed with a shower of sparks. The insurgent screamed as his own teammate's fire burned through his armor. He dropped, smoke rising from his ruined body. The last insurgent froze, horrified at what he had just done. That hesitation cost him his life. Jake hurled the stolen weapon like a spear. It hit the alien square in the face shield, cracking the transparent material. Before the insurgent could recover, Jake closed the distance and delivered a devastating punch to his throat. The alien went down choking. Jake stood over him, breathing hard. His armor was scorched and cracked in a dozen places. Burns covered his left leg and shoulder. His ears were ringing from the explosions and weapon fire. But he was still standing, still fighting. That was what mattered. Zara ran to him, her hands hovering over his wounds but not touching them. "You are injured. You need medical attention. Later." Jake picked up one of the fallen weapons and checked its charge. Half full. Good enough. He moved to the security console and started entering new commands. "How many soldiers does your father have in the capital?" 3 battalions? About 2,000 troops. But they are spread across the city. It will take time to recall them. We do not have time. Jake pulled up a tactical display of the palace. Red dots marked insurgent positions throughout the building. There were at least 20 more hostiles, all heavily armed and equipped with force fields. Against conventional troops, they would be nearly unstoppable. But Jake was not conventional. He opened a palace-wide communication channel. "This is Lieutenant Jake Morrison of the Terran Diplomatic Corps. All insurgent forces have 60 seconds to surrender, or I will activate the palace self-destruct system. The tactical display erupted with movement. Insurgents stopped their advance, conferring with each other in confusion. Some started retreating toward exits. Others held their ground, calling his bluff. They did not know that the palace had no self-destruct system. More importantly, they did not know that Jake knew it had no self-destruct system, but they did not know what he knew. Zara stared at him. There is no self-destruct system. They do not know that. They will figure it out in 60 seconds. By then, we will have repositioned. Jake grabbed her hand and pulled her toward a maintenance shaft he had spotted in the ceiling. Come on. We are going hunting. They climbed into the shaft and crawled through the narrow space. Below them, Jake could hear insurgents moving through the corridors, their voices tight with uncertainty. The false threat had scattered their formation. Instead of working as a coordinated unit, they were now individuals trying to escape. Individuals were easier to eliminate. Jake led Zara through the maintenance network, using the security feeds on his wrist display to track insurgent movements. He found what he was looking for near the east wing. 3 insurgents had separated from the main group, trying to reach an exit. They were moving quickly, afraid of a non-existent self-destruct. He dropped down behind them from a ceiling vent. The first insurgent never saw him coming. Jake fired the stolen weapon point blank into the back of his head where the force field did not extend. The second one started to turn. Jake drove his elbow into the alien's temple with enough force to shatter bone. The third insurgent got his weapon halfway up before Jake's shot took him in the chest at close range, overwhelming his shields through sheer proximity. Zara dropped down beside him, looking at the bodies with a strange expression. You are killing them very efficiently. That is my job. No, your job was to escort me to diplomatic functions, to smile and look impressive in your formal uniform. Nobody told me you were trained to do this. You never asked. Jake checked his weapon. Quarter charge remaining. Stay close. We are going after the leader. They moved through the palace like ghosts, using maintenance shafts and servant passages that the insurgents did not know existed. Jake picked off isolated enemies when he could, avoided larger groups when he could not. His armor was falling apart, held together by straps and determination. His injuries throbbed with every movement, but he kept pushing forward because stopping meant dying, and dying was not an option. They reached the throne room where the attack had begun. The lead insurgent was there with 5 of his remaining troops, trying to access the royal vault. They had cutting torches and were working on the massive door that protected the crown jewels and state secrets. The leader was shouting orders, frustrated at the delay. He had expected this to be quick and clean. Instead, it had turned into a nightmare. Jake studied the room from their hiding spot in a high balcony. 6 targets, 1 weapon with limited charge. Bad odds. He had fought worse. He turned to Zara. Can you use a weapon? I was trained in ceremonial pistol shooting. Good enough. He pulled a small backup pistol from an ankle holster and handed it to her. Point at the target, pull the trigger. Keep pulling until it stops making noise. Can you do that? She nodded, gripping the weapon with both hands. Her whole body was tense with fear, but her eyes were determined. Jake almost smiled. She was royal through and through. When the situation demanded courage, she would find it. On my signal, shoot at the insurgents near the vault. You will not hit them, but you will make them dive for cover. That is all I need. What will you do? Something stupid. He did not wait for her response. He vaulted over the balcony railing and dropped 20 feet to the throne room floor. He landed hard, his injured leg nearly buckling. Pain shot through his body, but he channeled it into pure aggression. He was already firing before the insurgents realized he was there. His first shot took down the guard on the far left. The second shot made the leader's force field flare bright blue. The third shot missed as Jake rolled sideways to avoid return fire. Zara opened fire from above, her shots going wide but forcing 3 insurgents to scatter. The element of surprise was gone, but the chaos was just beginning. Jake ran straight at the leader, firing as he moved. It was suicidal. It was insane. It was exactly what no trained tactical fighter would do. That was why it worked. The insurgents expected him to take cover and trade shots. They expected rational behavior. But Jake had learned long ago that rational behavior got you killed when you were outnumbered and outgunned. He closed the distance before they could adapt. His weapon ran dry 3 feet from the leader. Jake threw it aside and kept coming. The leader fired point blank. The energy bolt hit Jake's chest plate, burning through the last layer of protection. Jake felt his skin blister from the heat. He ignored it. His fist connected with the leader's face shield, cracking it further. His other hand grabbed the force field emitter and ripped it from the alien's chest. The shield collapsed. The leader stumbled back, dropping his weapon in shock. Jake did not give him time to recover. A knee to the midsection, an elbow to the temple, a savage kick that sent the leader sprawling. The alien did not get up. The other 4 insurgents were recovering from their initial surprise. They were bringing their weapons to bear, force fields at maximum. Jake grabbed the leader's weapon from the floor and opened fire at close range. The insurgents' shields absorbed most of the energy, but Jake was not aiming to kill. He was aiming to destroy their equipment. He shot the closest insurgent's weapon arm. The limb came apart in a spray of blood and the weapon clattered away. He shot another's leg, forcing him to the ground. The third tried to charge him. Jake sidestepped and delivered a spinning kick that sent the alien crashing into a column. The fourth got a shot off that burned a line across Jake's shoulder. He felt flesh cook but did not slow down. He was out of energy charge, but momentum kept him moving. He grabbed a fallen ceremonial spear from the wall and used it like a staff. He broke one insurgent's knee, cracked another's ribs. The aliens were bigger and stronger, but Jake had spent years learning how to fight opponents with physical advantages. Size did not matter when you knew where to strike. The last insurgent standing decided discretion was the better part of valor. He ran for the exit. Jake let him go. One survivor could tell the others what happened here, could spread the word that attacking the human had been a fatal mistake. Zara climbed down from the balcony, still holding the pistol. She looked at the carnage around them. Bodies everywhere, scorch marks on the walls and floor, and in the middle of it all, one human in ruined armor, bleeding from a dozen wounds, breathing hard but still standing.
"How?" she whispered.
"How are you still alive?" Jake dropped the spear and limped toward her. "Because giving up is not in my species' vocabulary. We are not the strongest or the fastest or the smartest, but we are too stubborn to quit. That is why your people should never mock our armor, Princess. It is not meant to make us invincible. It is meant to keep us in the fight long enough to win." Sirens wailed in the distance. The royal guard was finally arriving. The battle was over. Jake allowed himself to collapse against a column, his body finally acknowledging the pain it had been ignoring. Zara knelt beside him, pressing her hands against his worst wound to slow the bleeding. "I am sorry," she said softly. "I mocked you when we first met. I called your armor primitive. I was wrong." "You were not wrong. It is primitive, but primitive does not mean ineffective."
She smiled despite everything.
"I will remember that." Jake's vision started to blur. Blood loss and exhaustion were catching up with him, but he had done his job. The princess was safe. The insurgents were defeated. Whatever happened next, he could face it knowing he had not quit when things looked impossible. As consciousness faded, his last thought was simple. Maybe the aliens would stop underestimating humans now, or maybe they would keep making the same mistake. Either way, it did not really matter. Humans would keep proving themselves one battle at a time, one stubborn stand at a time, until the entire galaxy understood what it meant to face a species that simply refused to lose. The royal guard found them there, the princess cradling the human warrior who had saved her life, surrounded by the bodies of those who had learned too late that the most dangerous thing in the universe is not advanced technology or superior numbers. It is a human who has decided that retreat is not an option. Jake woke in a medical bay 3 days later. His body was encased in alien healing technology that pulsed with soft blue light. The burns and wounds were already fading to scars. A doctor, some insect-like species he did not recognize, chittered at him in broken English that he was lucky to be alive. Jake did not feel particularly lucky. He felt like he had been hit by a truck, and then the truck had backed over him for good measure. Zara was sitting beside his bed. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her silver eyes. She smiled when she saw him awake. "Welcome back, Lieutenant. We thought we had lost you twice during surgery. Sorry to disappoint." Jake tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. His entire torso screamed in protest. "What did I miss?" "You have been asleep for 3 days. The Royal Guard has been questioning the surviving insurgents. It was a coup attempt by a radical faction. They wanted to replace my father with a more aggressive government, the kind that would restart the border wars." "How many survived?" 7 out of 40. You killed or incapacitated most of them yourself." She paused, her expression troubled. "The military command is very interested in how one human defeated 40 elite soldiers equipped with coalition military technology. I got lucky." "You got lucky 40 times in a row?" "Even my father does not believe that, and he wants to believe it because the alternative is terrifying." "What alternative?" "That human training and tactics are far more advanced than we realized. That our intelligence agencies completely underestimated your species' combat capabilities. That we have been treating humans as junior partners in the coalition when we should have been treating you as equals." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Jake, 3 different military branches want to study your armor and weapons. They want to understand how you breached force fields that should have been impenetrable. The scientists are going crazy trying to figure out how you moved so fast while injured. Tell them it is not about the equipment. It is about the training. They want to study the training too. They want to embed observers with human military units. Some are even suggesting that coalition soldiers should be trained by human instructors." Jake laughed, then winced as the movement pulled at his healing wounds. 6 months ago, your people were arguing that humans should not be allowed to serve in combat roles because we were too primitive. Now they want us to train their soldiers? You changed their minds, or rather, you beat their minds into submission with your primitive armor and stubborn refusal to die. I like that version better." Zara stood and walked to the window, overlooking the capital city. The massive towers gleamed in the double sunset, a sea of crystal and metal stretching to the horizon. "My father wants to meet with you when you are recovered. He wants to apologize personally for how you were treated when you arrived. He also wants to discuss expanding the human military presence in our system. I am just a lieutenant. I do not make those decisions. No, but you influence them." She turned back to him, her expression serious. "What you did changed everything, Jake. The entire coalition is talking about it. About the human who fought off an entire attack force with outdated equipment and pure determination. Some are calling you a hero. Others are calling you terrifying. A few are calling you proof that humans should be given more respect and authority in coalition affairs. What are you calling me?" She smiled. A friend. One who saved my life at great personal cost. One who showed me that my prejudices were foolish and dangerous. One who taught me that technology is no substitute for courage and skill. A chime sounded at the door. A guard entered and spoke to Zara in their flowing language. She nodded and turned to Jake. "Your commanding officer is here. Admiral Chen wants to see you." "Great. I am about to get yelled at for destroying my armor and causing an international incident." "Actually, she is here to give you a medal, several medals, and a promotion." "I do not want a promotion. I like being a lieutenant. Lieutenants get to do things. Captains have to fill out paperwork. I will let you tell her that yourself." Zara left as Admiral Chen entered. The Admiral was a stern woman in her 50s, with gray streaks in her black hair and eyes that missed nothing. She looked at Jake lying in the medical bed, covered in healing technology, and her expression softened just slightly. "You look like hell, Morrison." "Thank you, ma'am. I tried my best. According to the reports, you saved Princess Zara and single-handedly defeated a well-armed insurgent force using nothing but basic infantry training and sheer stubborn willpower." "I had help, ma'am. The princess provided covering fire at a critical moment. She fired 12 rounds and missed every single one." "Yes, ma'am. But she kept them distracted long enough for me to close the distance." Chen pulled up a chair and sat down. For a long moment she just looked at him. Then she sighed. "Do you have any idea what you have done, Lieutenant? Survived? You have turned the entire coalition military doctrine upside down. For 300 years, warfare has been about force fields and energy weapons, about who has the biggest shields and the most powerful guns. You just proved that ancient Earth combat techniques are still effective against modern technology. Do you know what that means? That people will stop mocking our armor. It means that every military in the coalition is now re-evaluating their strategies. It means that human military contractors are about to be very busy. It means that the balance of power just shifted in ways that politicians and generals are still trying to comprehend." She leaned forward. "It also means that you are now extremely valuable. Every intelligence agency in the coalition wants to know how humans train their soldiers. Some want to copy our methods. Others want to find weaknesses they can exploit." "What do you want me to do, ma'am?" "Your job. Keep protecting human interests. Keep showing the aliens that we deserve respect. Keep being the stubborn, resourceful, slightly insane soldier that makes our species look good." She stood and produced a small box from her jacket. "These are your medals, one for valor under fire, one for protecting a coalition dignitary, one for exceptional combat performance. Wear them proudly." Jake took the box but did not open it. "With respect, ma'am, I do not feel like a hero. I just did what needed to be done." "That is what makes you a hero, Lieutenant. Heroes never think they are doing anything special. They just see a problem and fix it, regardless of the cost." She headed for the door, then paused. "Oh, and Morrison, you are getting promoted to captain. Do not bother arguing. The paperwork is already filed. Welcome to the wonderful world of military bureaucracy." She left before Jake could protest. He lay back against the medical bed, staring at the ceiling. Captain Morrison. It had a strange ring to it. He had joined the military to serve his species, to prove that humans could hold their own in a galaxy full of advanced aliens. He had never expected to become some kind of symbol. But maybe that was okay. Maybe humans needed symbols. Maybe the coalition needed to see that advanced technology was not the only path to victory. Maybe the entire galaxy needed a reminder that courage and determination still mattered in an age of energy shields and plasma weapons. Zara returned an hour later with food from the palace kitchens. real food, not the medical nutrition paste the doctors had been trying to feed him. She sat with him while he ate, telling him about the political fallout from the coup attempt. Arrests had been made. Trials were being scheduled. The radical faction had been crushed. Their dreams of renewed warfare ended before they could begin. "My father wants to invite you to a formal dinner once you are recovered," she said. "A celebration of your heroism and a chance to improve relations between our species. I am not good at formal dinners. You will have to learn. You are a celebrity now, Jake. The human who defeated an army. People will want to meet you, talk to you, understand how you did what you did. I just survived. That is all. No, you won. There is a difference." She met his eyes. "And you won using methods that the Coalition had forgotten. Speed over shields, precision over power, adaptability over advanced technology. You reminded us that the fundamentals of combat have not changed in thousands of years, no matter how advanced our weapons become." Jake finished eating and set the plate aside. "What happens now? Now you recover. Then you return to duty. Then you probably become very busy, as every human diplomatic mission suddenly requests your presence. Being the soldier who saved a princess is going to make you very popular. I hate being popular." "Then you should not have been so dramatically heroic." They both laughed. It felt good to laugh after everything that had happened. Jake realized that despite the pain and the exhaustion and the bureaucratic nightmare awaiting him, he felt satisfied. He had done his job. He had protected someone who needed protecting. He had proven that humans belonged in the Coalition as equals, not as second-class members with primitive technology. Over the next 2 weeks, Jake recovered quickly thanks to the advanced medical technology. The burns healed to thin scars. The broken bones knitted back together. His strength returned. But something else changed, too. When he walked through the palace corridors, aliens who had once ignored him now stopped and saluted. Guards who had barely acknowledged his existence now treated him with respect. Even the servants looked at him with something like awe. The formal dinner was exactly as terrible as Jake had feared. He wore his dress uniform with the new medals prominently displayed. He sat at a table with royalty and military commanders from a dozen species. He made small talk about combat tactics and training methods. He smiled and nodded and tried not to fall asleep from boredom. But he also watched Zara shine. She was in her element, moving between guests with grace and charm, her earlier fear completely gone. She had faced death and survived. She had seen what real courage looked like. It had changed her in ways that would make her a better leader when she eventually inherited the throne. Near the end of the evening, her father, the king, stood to make a speech. He was an imposing figure with deep violet skin and silver tattoos that marked his royal lineage. His voice carried across the hall with practiced authority. 3 weeks ago, an attempt was made on my daughter's life. The attackers were well-trained and well-equipped. They should have succeeded, but they made one critical error. They underestimated the human in outdated armor standing between them and their target. Lieutenant Jake Morrison, now Captain Morrison, single-handedly defeated 40 insurgents using tactics and determination that our enemies did not anticipate and could not counter. In doing so, he not only saved my daughter's life, but also reminded the Coalition that technology alone does not win wars. Courage wins wars. Skill wins wars. The refusal to quit wins wars. The king raised his glass to Captain Morrison, to the humans who prove themselves equal to any challenge, and to the hope that we may learn from their example. The entire hall stood and toasted. Jake felt his face burning with embarrassment, but he stood and nodded in acknowledgement. This was his life now. He would never again be just another soldier in outdated armor. He was a symbol, a reminder that humans belonged among the stars, not as primitives to be mocked, but as warriors to be respected. Later, standing on a balcony overlooking the glittering city, Zara joined him. "You hate all of this, do not you?"
Every minute.
"Good. That means you will not let it change you." She looked out at the skyline. "Do you know what the military analysts concluded after studying what happened? That I was lucky. That human training emphasizes adaptability and improvisation in ways that coalition training does not. That we have become too dependent on technology and have forgotten the basics. That every soldier, regardless of species, should learn hand-to-hand combat and tactical flexibility." She smiled. "They want to completely restructure military training, all because one stubborn human refused to let force fields and energy weapons determine the outcome of a fight." Jake shook his head in disbelief. "I was just trying not to die. And in trying not to die, you changed everything." She touched his arm gently. "Thank you, Jake. Not just for saving my life, but for showing me that strength comes in many forms. I was arrogant before. I judged your armor without understanding its purpose. I judged your species without understanding your capabilities. I will not make that mistake again. Your people are not the only ones who make assumptions. Humans thought we would always be the underdogs in the coalition. We thought our technology would never catch up. We forgot that we do not need to catch up. We just need to use what we have better than anyone else." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the double moons rise over the alien city. Jake thought about the path that had brought him here, the years of training, the deployments to hostile worlds, the constant struggle to prove that humans deserved respect. All of it had led to those desperate minutes in the throne room when everything came down to skill versus technology, courage versus firepower. He had won that fight. But more importantly, his species had won recognition. From now on, when aliens looked at human armor, they would not see primitive protection. They would see a tactical choice, a calculated decision to prioritize mobility and adaptability over passive defense. When they looked at human soldiers, they would not see inferior warriors with outdated equipment. They would see fighters who had mastered the fundamentals so completely that technology became secondary. That was worth all the formal dinners and unwanted celebrity. That was worth the pain and the scars, because ultimately, Jake had not been fighting just for Zara. He had been fighting for every human who had ever been underestimated, dismissed, or mocked for their simple technology. He had been fighting to prove that humanity belonged among the stars as equals, and he had won. 3 months later, Jake stood in a coalition military training facility watching human instructors teach alien soldiers the basics of close-quarters combat. The aliens were struggling, their bodies not built for the rapid movements and constant improvisation that humans took for granted. But they were learning. Slowly, painfully, they were learning that all the shields and energy weapons in the galaxy meant nothing if you could not adapt when the situation changed. Admiral Chen stood beside him, observing the training with a satisfied expression. "This is just the beginning. 5 more training facilities are being built. Human combat doctrine is being incorporated into coalition military academies across 12 systems. In 10 years, every soldier in the coalition will have been trained at least partially by human instructors. Will it make a difference?" Jake asked. "It already has. Casualty rates are down, mission success rates are up. Soldiers who complete human-led training programs show significantly improved performance in unexpected situations." She glanced at him. "You started something important, Morrison. These soldiers will go back to their units and spread what they have learned. Eventually, The entire coalition military will be better because one human refused to let technology determine who lived and who died. Jake watched an instructor demonstrate a disarming technique on a much larger alien. The alien tried to counter, failed, and ended up on the mat. The instructor helped him up patiently and showed him again where he went wrong. It was a simple scene, repeated millions of times in training facilities across Earth. Now it was happening across the galaxy. I just wish it had not taken a near-death experience to make people listen. That is how change happens. Someone has to pay the price first. You paid it. Now others benefit. Chen turned to leave, then paused. By the way, Princess Zara's father has requested that you be assigned as a permanent military liaison to their court. Apparently his daughter speaks very highly of your professionalism and combat effectiveness. I do not want a desk job, ma'am. It would not be a desk job. More like a roaming assignment with diplomatic cover. You would assess threats, train their security forces, and occasionally throw yourself into life-threatening situations to protect important people. Essentially what you have been doing, but with better pay and a nicer title. That sounds suspiciously like a promotion in disguise. Major Morrison does have a nice ring to it. I am going to decline. Your declination has been noted and ignored. The assignment starts next month. Try not to get killed before then. Chen walked away, leaving Jake alone with his thoughts and the sounds of training. He could have been angry about the forced promotion and assignment. Instead, he felt oddly content. This was his purpose. Not pushing papers or attending formal dinners, but being in the field where things happened, where his skills mattered, where he could make a difference. And if that meant dealing with diplomatic functions and unwanted celebrity, so be it. He had faced 40 armed insurgents with nothing but determination and outdated armor. He could survive anything the bureaucracy threw at him. Probably. He walked down to the training floor and joined one of the practice sessions. The alien soldiers looked surprised to see him, then excited. They all knew the story by now. The human who fought an army and won. They peppered him with questions about tactics and technique. He answered patiently, demonstrating moves and explaining the philosophy behind human combat training. We do not rely on technology to keep us alive, he told them. We rely on skill, awareness, and the will to keep fighting when everything has gone wrong. Your shields will fail. Your weapons will malfunction. When that happens, will you quit or will you adapt? The aliens did not answer. They just worked harder, pushing themselves to master techniques that did not come naturally to their bodies. Jake smiled. They were learning not just the moves, but the mindset. That was what mattered. That was what would keep them alive. And maybe, just maybe, it would help prevent the next war. Because soldiers who had trained together, who had learned from each other, were less likely to see each other as enemies. They were more likely to find common ground, to resolve disputes before they escalated to violence. It was an optimistic thought, probably naive, but Jake had learned that optimism and naivety were not the same thing. Optimism was choosing to believe that things could get better and then working to make it happen. Naivety was ignoring reality. He saw reality clearly. The galaxy was dangerous. Wars would happen. People would die. But maybe fewer wars. Maybe fewer deaths. Because soldiers across the coalition were learning that the universe did not belong to those with the best technology. It belonged to those who refused to quit. That night, Jake video called his parents back on Earth. His mother cried when she saw him, as she always did. His father asked gruff questions about his health and safety. They had seen the news reports about the coup attempt. They had heard the stories about their son, the hero. They were proud and terrified in equal measure. "Are you taking care of yourself?" his mother asked. "Yes, Mom. The alien doctors are very good. But are you eating properly? Sleeping enough?
I am fine.
Really? His father leaned into the camera. The news is calling you the most dangerous human in the coalition. The news exaggerates. Do they? Because from what I heard, you fought off an entire attack force by yourself. I had help. Princess Zara provided supporting fire. She missed every shot. Okay, minimal help, but still help. They talked for another hour, catching up on family news and Earth politics. Jake's younger sister was getting married. His older brother had been promoted at his civilian job. Life on Earth continued as it always had, seemingly unaffected by the drama playing out among the stars. It was comforting in a way. No matter how much things changed in the coalition, Earth remained Earth. Home remained home. When the call ended, Jake sat in his quarters staring at pictures on his tablet. His family, his friends from the academy, fellow soldiers from past deployments, all of them were part of the reason he did what he did. He was not just fighting for abstract concepts like honor or duty. He was fighting so that humans like his parents and siblings could live in a galaxy that respected them as equals. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Zara entered without waiting for permission. She had been spending more time at the training facility lately, observing the classes and learning about human military philosophy. She wore simple civilian clothes instead of her usual royal attire. It made her look younger, less intimidating. I hope I am not intruding, she said. You are, but come in anyway. She sat on the edge of his desk. I wanted to thank you again. I know I have said it many times, but I do not think I have truly expressed how much you changed my perspective. You have thanked me plenty. You do not need to keep doing it. Yes, I do, because I was not just wrong about your armor. I was wrong about everything, about humans, about the importance of technology, about what makes a good warrior. She looked down at her hands. My people have been the dominant military power in this region for 2 centuries. We became arrogant. We forgot that power is temporary and that adaptability is eternal. You reminded us of that lesson. I did not set out to teach anyone anything. I was just trying to survive. That is what makes the lesson so powerful. You were not trying to prove a point or show off. You were doing your job with the tools you had available, and those tools were enough because you knew how to use them perfectly. Jake shrugged. Any human soldier would have done the same thing. Would they? Because I have been studying human military history since the attack. Do you know what I learned? That we fight a lot. That humans win impossible battles with alarming regularity. You have stories about small forces defeating much larger armies, about soldiers holding positions against overwhelming odds, about victories snatched from certain defeat through pure determination. She leaned forward, her eyes bright with intensity. Other species do not have these stories, Jake. When we are outnumbered, we retreat. When we are outgunned, we surrender. We make the rational choice. But humans make the impossible choice. You fight when anyone sane would run, and somehow you survive. Not always. We have lost plenty of battles. But you never stop trying. That is the difference. My people give up when the odds are bad. Yours just get angrier and fight harder. Jake thought about that. She was not wrong. Human history was full of last stands and desperate defenses. Thermopylae, the Alamo, Stalingrad. Humans had a strange habit of deciding that some things were worth dying for and then refusing to die. It was irrational. It was probably some evolutionary quirk left over from the days when giving up meant extinction, but it worked. Maybe we are just too stupid to know when we are beaten, he said. Or maybe you are smart enough to know that being beaten is a choice. They talked long into the night, discussing philosophy and tactics and the future of human-alien relations. When Zara finally left, Jake felt more at peace than he had since the attack. He had done something meaningful, not just saved one person, but changed how an entire civilization viewed his species. That was worth more than any medal or promotion. He pulled up his personal logs and started recording. It was a habit he had developed years ago, a way to process events and emotions. He spoke about the attack, the recovery, the changes that were spreading through the coalition military. He talked about his doubts and fears, about whether he deserved the recognition he was receiving, about whether humanity was really ready for the responsibility that came with being respected as military equals. But mostly he talked about hope. Hope that the galaxy was becoming a better place. Hope that humans and aliens could find common ground. Hope that future soldiers would not have to fight as hard to prove themselves because he had already proven it for them. When he finished recording, he looked at himself in the mirror. The scars were fading, but they would never fully disappear. His face was thinner than before the attack, worn by stress and pain. He looked older than his 28 years, but his eyes were clear. His hands were steady. He was still a soldier, still human, still ready for whatever came next. And what came next was a galaxy that finally understood what it meant when a human strapped on primitive armor and decided that retreat was not an option. They had learned that lesson the hard way, through blood and fire, but they had learned it.